We'll be talking about high availability and disaster recovery solution for Azure SQL database. I thank the organizers for for this opportunity, and Javier did a nice presentation. I hope you enjoyed that. So this is about myself. I'm not going to read all this, but just take a note of my contact because we will be rushing for time. So at the end of the presentation, if you have any question, comments, or you want to follow up, reach out to me. I already uploaded the presentation and all the demo code in the GitHub repo, and I also put a link on the SQL Saturday Bangladesh website. So if I do not get through everything, you can definitely follow up with me later on. So this is a real life scenario that happened in 2019 in one of the Microsoft Azure region. So because of a storage issue, a lot of other resources got affected, and many Azure SQL databases were not available for 16 hour 11 minute. So the question that you need to ask, if you're at your work, you have Azure SQL database that's supporting your business, can you afford this downtime, right? Can you afford a downtime of 16 hour 11 minute? And the answer for most of the people will be no. And that's one of the reasons that we need to look at what are the options that are available, and pros and cons for each of the option. But how do you decide that what options you pick? Because I'm probably going to show you 6 or 7 of those. Now, as a data professional, how do you decide which one you want to implement, which one is best for you? And that's something a DBA should not decide, in my view. You should not decide what solutions you pick. I think you give the options to the business owners and explain them all the pros and cons, tell them what can happen, how long it's going to take to bring up, and then, what is the cost involved, and then let them, decide that. So, it should be a two-way dialogue, not just, I'm a DBA, this is what I think, and I'm just going to implement it. Because at the end of the day, it's the business owners have to give the final saying on this. So before even we decide that, there are two concepts that we always knew even when Azure did not exist. On-premise also, we always talk about RTO and RPO. And I'm not going to go into details, but if you do not know this, I'll definitely urge you to take a look what are these definitions means. And recovery time objective is how long it takes for you to recover once a disaster happened. And recovery point objective is how far, at what point I can recover up to. So how much data I can afford to lose. And for some businesses, you cannot afford to lose any data, not a single second. And for some businesses, maybe you can. And so sometimes the business owner will come and tell you, no, I cannot afford to lose any data, not a single second. Then you tell them, okay, for that, if you need that kind of RPO, then you only have these are the solutions available for you. And to implement these solutions, these are the things that we need, and this is what it's going to cost you. And if the business owner can, say, okay, we can afford that kind of money, you go and implement it. If they say no, then you give them other options, show them, and let them decide. But there is a newer concept, that we did not know before. Is called ERT, which is estimated recovery time. And ERT is the max ERT is same as your recovery time objective. So you can have different ERT during different disaster, during different scenario, but your max ERT cannot exceed whatever the RTO that you decide. So to put all this, in a graphics, I put this slide so it's a little bit easier to understand what I mean by RPO and RTO. And now, how do we get there? So before we get there, we need to understand Azure SQL Database is not just one flavor. So if you go to portal today, or if you try to spin up a Azure SQL Database, you have all these options, right? So you have these two purchase model. One is DTU and one is vCore. And then within those, you have different service tier. And I'm not going to read the slide, but under those service tier, then you have, either it's provisioned or serverless for DTU. And also in the vCore, you have business critical and under the vCore, you have, general purpose, business critical, hyperscale. Under general purpose, you can also go for serverless and provision. And then what kind of hardware you choose. Now, based on this, you'll be restricted of what options you can choose and pick for your high availability and disaster recovery solution. So before even you choose, so you have to track back. Now you decided that you want to implement this HADR solution. Now you need to see what tier or what purchase model, what service tier and what compute tier I can implement those HADR solutions. Based on that, you need to also choose your purchase model and service tier and all that. So just keep that in mind. Now I mentioned DTU and vCore. Those of you who do not work with the Azure SQL Database, you might be wondering what does a DTU mean and what's a vCore mean. So DTU was the first purchase model that Microsoft released when first Azure SQL Database was released. And DTU stands for Database Transaction Unit. So it's an abstraction of your compute, storage, and I/O. And with the vCore model, you can separately scale your CPU and storage. It's not bundled together for you. So you can independently scale all three components. Whereas with the DTU, you cannot do scale those independently because they come as a bundle for you. And Microsoft recommend to go to the vCore model, but DTU model still exists. If you want to go there, you can deploy with that model too. And feel free, if you have any question, please put in the chat room. So the organizers can stop me at any point, and I'll answer the questions. If I'm going too fast or something is not clear, please put the questions in the chat room. So what are the options we have? I put those here. I'm going to read those, but I'm not going to talk about the first one, the temporal table, because that's pretty much same as on-premise. This came out in 2016, and has made some improvement. This is also available 2016, 2017, 2019. And you can also implement that same in Azure SQL Database. But I'm going to talk about other 5 that you see here in this slide. Now, before we go there or discuss this, we need to know RTO and RPO for some of these solutions, right? So with the backup, our RTO can be up to 12 hours. So what does that mean? Means if I do not implement any other solution, just the automated backup, if I want to rely on that, and if a whole region goes down, yeah, I have a copy of my backup in a different region that I can spin up a Azure SQL server and I can restore it, but I might need 12 hours, up to 12 hours. That's the SLA Microsoft guaranteed you. So when a business owner say that, okay, I don't need to implement any other solution, I'm happy with backup, you tell them if a region go down, it might take us 12 hours to bring you up and running. And that's the max ERT, which I showed you before. Not that every time it's going to take 12 hours, but that's what is guaranteed. And if they're okay with it, that's fine. And you can lose up to 1 hour of data. Now with the auto failover groups, we'll talk about these options in detail. Your RTO is 1 hour and 5 seconds. And with active geo replication, you can see that it's 30 seconds and 5 seconds, which is the best. But it also has some, some cons or some pros, and we'll look at, we'll compare and contrast some of this. So first one is a automated backup. One thing you want to understand that on premise, I can have very granular control of my backup, right? If I want to take transactional log backup every 5 minutes, I can decide what time I want to start, right? I can say exactly 3 minutes past hour, I want to take a transactional log backup. I can take a differential backup every hour if I choose to. I can take a full backup every 4 hours if I choose to. Not that I'm going to do it, but you have more granular control. With Azure SQL Database, try to understand that you do not have that control. You do not have that precise control what time you take those backups, because Microsoft will decide when to take those backups. And if you read this code from the Microsoft documentation, I highlighted two words called generally. Means, about, right? So we'll take every 12 hours. They don't tell you, is it at midnight and noontime? And then transactional log backups every 5 to 10 minutes. So every 5 to 10 minutes, you do not have that precise control that you had on premise. So just keep that in mind. For point in time restore, step back a little bit. So your full backup is done every weekly, once a week. Differential is every 12 to 24 hours. And transactional log is every 5 to 10 minutes. Again, it's not precise, so just keep that in mind. And your point in time restore, except if you deploy in a basic tier, it's always for 7 days. So you can restore point in time from your backup for last 7 days, and that's by default. And you can increase that up to 35 days. Of course, you have to pay more for retaining those backups and pay for storage, except that one tier. You can also set up long-term retention, right? So I work for a financial industry. By the government rule in USA, I cannot be just keeping 35 days of backup. I need to keep more. If you work in healthcare, you also have a very strict rules for how long you need to keep the backup. So Azure gives you option to keep it for up to 10 years. You can save your backups, but not point in time. You cannot say, I want to go back point in time up to 10 years. You cannot do that. That's just not available. So the way it works, you have a weekly, monthly, and yearly backup, and then you can choose. So like, to give you an example, in this table, the first one is saying, I do not need to keep any weekly backup. I do not want any monthly backup. I want to keep it yearly for 5 years. So when I say yearly, now which backup? As you can see, it says week of the year, third. So every year, the third week's full backup, keep it for 5 years. On the second line, it's saying that just keep the first full backup of each month for 3 months. So it will be rolling for every 3 months. So there are other examples that you can look at. I'm not going to read this. So you can choose between, whatever is your need. Now the question is, okay, I take all these backups, what can I do? You can restore this in a new Azure SQL database, or you can restore this in the same logical server with a different name. So you cannot have two databases, of course, within a logical SQL server with the same name. So sometimes what people do is, if you had to say, like, someone did something by mistake, dropped a table or updated wrong data, you want to go back, say, like 30 minutes before. So normally what you will do, you'll rename your existing database, do a point in time restore, look at it, looks good, then you drop the other one. And you can have other options. You can also go to a different region, because your backups are automatically saved, and they are they're available in a different region than where your server or database reside. So they call this geo-replicated. So you can spin up a new Azure SQL Server and you can restore it there. One caution, like I said, you cannot override the existing database with the same name. And if you delete your SQL Server, you cannot restore those databases. But if you delete a single database, not the whole server, you can always restore it based on your backup retention. This is a question I often get. I'm not going to talk about this because of the interest of time. Can we restore on-premise of Azure SQL Database backup? You cannot really do directly, but there are other ways you can use different tools that you can create DACPack or Backpack, and you can bring it and create an on-premise SQL Server. If someone needs to talk more about that, let me know. Now, there's built-in HADR. So once we deploy Azure SQL Database, even if we do not do anything, you automatically get some high availability and disaster recovery solution. And just to keep that in mind, I'm not talking about you do not have a redundancy at the region level, or you also do not have a redundancy at the data center level. But within the data center, unless you turn on something called availability zone, which we'll look at, you do get some redundancy. So with the basic standard and general purpose, as you can see in this picture, you get 3 copies of your compute, and your data and log files also continuously get copied, have multiple copies, and your backup files, as we talked about, you get region redundancy. And if something goes wrong with your active VM, where your current compute is, it will automatically switch you to a different one. And you do not have to do anything. It will take care of it by itself. You will see a blip, of course, but if you have a retry in your application, it will work by itself. But if you go to premium or business critical, it's a little bit different, because every compute will have attached SSD where your data and log files are going to reside, compared to the previous one where it was at a remote storage, your data and log file. But with the premium and business critical, they're all attached to your compute, and your backup files is same as before. And as you can see with the red arrow, if something goes wrong with that VM, it will automatically fail over to a different one. And I put enough links at the end, you will see that you can read more about this. Now, what I showed you so far, it doesn't give me a redundancy at a data center level. So with Microsoft Azure regions, each region have multiple data center. So what you can choose to do with certain tiers, that you can turn on something called zone redundancy, data center redundancy, and they're called availability zone. And what does that mean? A availability zone, what it will do is your 3 different copies, it will put in such a way they are independent for your power, cooling, network. So if there's a problem within a data center inside a region, you will fail over to a different data center, but you're still within the same region, and then it will just function itself. So for general purpose tier, this is still in preview. It's not generally available. As you can see now, I have 3 zone, AZ1, AZ2, and AZ3, and they're all separate. So my compute and my storage, my network, everything is separate. We are still within a region, and that's how you get that data center redundancy. And for premium and business critical, pretty much same concept, except your data and log files are attached to the VM in a SSD. And you do not have to pay any extra. You can just turn this on for business critical and premium. When you create your Azure SQL database, you can just turn it on. You just checkbox, and if you're using PowerShell, there's option, and they will, it will automatically get created for you. They will be in 3 different data centers. Okay. So active geo replication. This is built on-premise. We know something called always on availability group. So active geo replication for Azure SQL databases is built on the same technology. This is available for all tiers except hyperscale. As you see, I put a note there. So as we are writing to our Azure SQL database, the logs are continuously getting shipped, transaction logs, to the secondary and getting applied there. But one thing you have to keep in mind, this is asynchronous. This is not synchronous. So on-premise, you can choose between synchronous and asynchronous, but in cloud, for Azure SQL database, it's continuously asynchronous. And you can also use your secondary for your read-only traffic, and we'll look at that. Now, this may be a problem for some transactions, right? Because if I want to guarantee that my certain transactions at least got hardened or at least got written into two different places, I want to guarantee that, right? Because what happened if I finish writing in the primary and it's transporting to the secondary, and then my primary fail or something goes wrong. So for that, you have a solution. You can use this. I'm not going to go into details because you don't have much time, but you can use this SPOID for database copy sync within your transaction. That will guarantee that before the caller get an acknowledgement, it will be hardened on the secondary. So that will be guaranteed. Now, we talked about active geo replication. That's at a database level, right? So you, every database, you have to set it up for each one. Now, you might have an application that is being supported by a set of database, right? So like on-premise today, we have something called availability group, right? So within a server, I can have multiple availability group per application, and I can fail over availability group. It fails over all my databases within that availability group. It's a similar concept. On-premise, they call this auto failover groups. And how does that work? So you have two databases here in this picture in my primary logical SQL server, and I put them in a group. And if I need to fail over, once I say fail over, both databases will go and fail over to the secondary. Now, with the active geo replication that I showed you before, you can have up to four secondaries in different region or within a region. But if you want to set up auto failover group, you do not have that option. You can only have one secondary, and it has to be in a different region. But one good advantage here is that if you fail over, you do not have to change your connection string. So your connection strings remain unchanged, and I'll show this in the demo. Azure will redirect your queries or your calls to the correct server. You can use the secondary for read-only traffic, and by default, it is set for automatically failing over. If it detects something is wrong, it will fail over automatically. And if it fails over to your secondary, which was your read-only, that read-only automatically get disabled. So that's something you have to keep that in mind. So you get, as soon as you set up failover groups, you get these two endpoints. One is your failover, first one is for read-write, and second one is for your read-only traffic. And as I said, if it fails over, you do not have to do anything. It will automatically redirect to the appropriate server. Now here are some of the comparisons. It's a copy paste from Books Online that tells you what are the differences between geo-replication and auto-failover groups. As you can see, both has some pros and cons. So again, as I said at the beginning, it's all your choice. What do you need? Know the options, and based on that, you decide, which one you implement. This is a query that I put. Again, it's just one of the DMVs. If you want to know your replication status between the servers, between the databases, you can use this query, and it will show you your current status. I'm pretty much done with the slide. Before I move to the demo, I just want to show you something that I put all these resources. They are all hyperlinks. So you can click on those, and it will take you to most of the, to the Microsoft documentation to read more details. So I'm going to move to the demo. Let me set this up. Okay. So I'll be using, okay, see the chat window is, okay. I'll be using Azure Data Studio, and I'm using notebooks, PowerShell notebooks to do most of the demo. So a few things before all of you came online for this session. I already ran some of the code to set up. So just to show you what I did before because these things takes time. So I already spin up 3 Azure SQL Server and 2 databases, and they are created with a sample AdventureWorks, and I'll use those for the demo. And you'll get all the code. These are all in GitHub. You can run this as is. You have to make few changes. I put enough note where you have to make changes. So, and then you can run this. And if you run into any issues, let me know. So I'm going to start from here, as it says demo starts here. So anything you see on the top, I already ran this, and I already set it up for for the demo. So the first one is the automated backup. So if we go to the portal, and to see the backups, you really cannot go from the database. You have to go from the server. So if you go from the server, and if you go to manage backups, so I haven't done anything. I just set this up. So by default, as I said, as you can see, the point in time backup is 7 days, and the long-term retention is all empty. Now, if I want to, I can configure this retention from here, and I'll do it also from PowerShell. And I can go up to 35 days, as I explained. So I'm going to cancel it here. I'm going to go to my notebook. And we can also look at, is there any long-term retention set up, for this database that I'm talking about? You can use this PowerShell. It will tell us that, no, I do not have any of the retention set up. As you can see, it's all 0. So with this next set of command, I'm going to set up, I'm saying my weekly retention, keep it for 12 weeks. I do not need any monthly retention. Yearly, keep it for 5 years. Every 16th week, the backup, full backup, keep it for 5 years. So I'm going to set this up using this command. While this is running, we can go to the portal, and if we refresh it here, we should see that, it'll be set up once it's done. So I'm going to move on. I don't want to wait for this. And once you set this up, if you don't want to go to the portal and use the GUI every time, you want to monitor, what's your new long-term retention, you can use this PowerShell to see it. I think I'm going to turn off my camera just to get a little bit of bandwidth. Okay. Oh, no, sorry, I made a mistake. Okay, I'm going to turn off my camera. So, yep. Now, as you can see, if I refresh it, you can see the long-term retention has been set up. If you want to remove long-term retention, you can use this code. I'm not going to run it right now. Now, I talked about that without doing anything, you still get, some redundancy because you get 3 copies. Now, how can you test that you got 3 copies, right? So with this code, you can do that. And as I said, with the general purpose, it takes a little bit more time because it's based on failover cluster instance, and other one is based on always an availability group. So to show this, OSTress is a tool that that you can use to simulate some some load against a SQL, against a Azure SQL or even on premise. So I'm going to run this, and I'm pointing to this server and this database, and I'm just doing a select. And it's going to ask me for my password. I did it this way so I didn't have to hard code my password, so everyone can. So now, as you see, we are running this workload, right? It's doing a select, as you can see, a select count star from this table. Now I'm going to simulate a failover. As you can see, a failover happened. Server is not available, and I'm not doing anything else. I'm not touching any key. So our select is failing because the server is not available. And it's trying. At some point, you'll see that, it connected automatic. And I haven't set up any active geo replication. I haven't set up any failover group. It failed over within those, the copies that we get by default, right? So I'm going to stop this. So same concept. I'm not going to run this for the interest of time. If you do this one, it'll be a lot quicker than what we just saw, because this one is in the business critical tier. You will get it within like 2-3 seconds. You can test it by yourself. Next, we'll look at active geo replication. So again, I'm setting this up with this command, and I'm setting this up between primary server and secondary server. So if we go to portal, go back to dashboard. In my primary server, I have a database. In my secondary server, which is in central US, I do not have any database at this point, right? It's just a shell, empty database. If you go to overview, you can see this is in central US, and my primary server is in East US. And I'm going to set up a active geo application. So it's running right now. If we go to portal and if I go to the database, go to geo application, as you can see here, seeding 0% in Central US. This is my server, same database name. So now it's doing the initial seeding. Once the seeding is done, it will replicate every transaction. It's the same as on-premise always an availability group because it's as I said, it's built on the same concept. So if we refresh it, hopefully it'll be done quick. This is a so it's ready now. It's readable. So if we go to the secondary server right now, before we saw that there was no database, and now we can see that it got copied there. And it gives you all this all these outputs that where did it create, it got caught up, 100% completed. Now I'm doing a planned failover. So I'm saying now fail me over from East US to Central US. So we saw that before in East US we had the primary and the secondary was in Central US. And now if we go and look at the geo application, we'll see a reverse. As you can see now, the primary is in Central US and the secondary is East US. So it reversed the role. So you can do a planned failover if you need to using this command. It's still doing its stuff, but we can already see it in the portal. And I'm going to fail back just for my next demo. So far what we have done is at a database level, right? And as I said, if my application needed more database, select 2 or 3 databases that I want them to fail over, fail back together because they support one application, in that case, I have to create a failover group. And the technical term is auto failover group. And the way the failover groups work, when you first create it, it's actually empty. So you just create a shell and then you have to add the databases to that. So let's do that. So now if we go to the portal, go to dashboard again, and for failover group, because it's at a server level, because you can have multiple databases, you can see it from the server, when you choose a server, not from the database. Now, if you go to failover groups, there's nothing yet, still it's creating. Now you can see that I have a failover group, the name, I have a primary server, I have a secondary server. And if I go here, I can see the configuration, right? My primary, secondary, it tells me, and also show you on the map. And if I go to the database, I still do not have any database. I just created the group, but it's empty. And now I'm adding a database, the database that we've been playing with so far. It's the same database. So once the database is added, we should be able to see a name here. It will tell us, okay, now it's seeding. So yeah, so it's as you can see here, these dotted lines, and not yet. So once it's done, you'll see the list here. It will tell you the database name, the primary and the secondary. Still working. Okay. So it's caught up right now. If we go here, maybe I need to do a refresh. Failover group. Yeah, I have one database. So yeah, now we should be able to see that. Yep. So that database now, as you can see, I have it online, and I automatically get a readable copy on the secondary. Now, if I go and take these endpoints, right? We saw those. These automatically get created. So let's use this and see, what server it's pointing to. And as I told you a few times that I do not have to change the connection string. So the first one, I took that. So let's open a new query and select the server name, right? Connect. We are using those endpoints that we got from the portal. And we can just go with the default database. So as you see, it's a primary server name, right? Now let's change the connection string to the read-only endpoint and see what happened. So change connection, same login. Let's run this. As you see, it's connecting to secondary. So you do not have to do anything with your connection string. Those endpoints valid, always valid. So now we created the failover group, and let's fail over now and see what happened. And this time we are not failing over on the database. We are failing over on the failover group name, right? So if you go to the portal and refresh, as you see, the servers primary and secondary got flipped. You can see that this has become primary, this has become secondary. And same, if you go and run those again, you will see a different server name. Like if we come here now, we saw the secondary server was this. This was the read only, but oh, actually we are connected to that. Sorry, yeah. And if you want to see the status of your failover groups, you can use this PowerShell. Now, as I said before, once you set up active geo replication and also auto failover group, that you get read scale out, right? You can have read-only copies that you can take advantage of. So, and I put a note here, as you can see, a premium and business critical service tier is automatically enabled, and other tiers does not support it. So if you're in business critical and premium, you can take advantage of it. So for an Azure SQL database, how do we check if it's read enabled or not? And as you can see here, it says it's enabled at the bottom. Now, if we come here, and so I created this server called read scale out server. And let me make sure that I have the right connection string, right? If you run this, okay, I'm sorry, I know what happened here. So change connection. From here, if you say, I want to, this is my read write, my primary, or actually you do not have to say, yeah, you just leave it blank, like a normal connection string. You connect it. Say, okay, connect. I think I have to do it again. So we only have 4 minutes. So let me take this name and then try to do this. What I'm trying to show you is if you just have a regular connection string to this server, and you say connect. Once you run this, still read only. I think it's taking it from here. Anyway, so if you change it to, in your connection string, if you say your application intent is read only, you will go to the read only server. If you say no, I do not want that, you do not have to put this, it will say that I'm on the read write node. So that's kind of, you can try it with this. I ran this demo before all of you came online. I think it cached it and I just have to clear it out. And once you're done with the whole thing, please do run this. So it will delete your resource group and it will delete all the resources. Otherwise, you will continuously get billed for that. So that's all I have. And here is my contact again. In case, I know we rushed through a couple of things. So if you have, any questions, comments later on, please reach out to me. And I thank you for joining. I hope you enjoy, rest of the presentations.